54 degrees tomorrow on December 15th. Wow. Yeah, that's normal. That's nothing unusual there. Wow. 952-946-6205. Well, you know, with 2022 coming up here, we are going to restart up the Democrat of the Day series before too long because we got a lot of races we got to talk about. Not only here in Minnesota, but also across the river, our friends in Wisconsin, too. Well, because there is a seat over there, Wisconsin 3, which needs to be held by the Democrats. I'm actually going to start it up a little early this year because I'm going to have a lot of people that want to get in, talk about their campaigns. And so it's an opportunity for you to hear about a candidate that's running for the Democratic nomination for to run in the Wisconsin 3. In Wisconsin 3. Rebecca Cooke is kind enough to join us right now. She is deciding to run and hopefully can hold that seat for the Democrats. Hi, Rebecca. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on. We don't get a lot of Wisconsin politicians, but the reality is if you're especially on the south side of town, it's probably closer to your district, the Wisconsin 3, than it is to, say, districts up in the northwest part of the metro.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's a lot of folks that live in Wisconsin and work in Minnesota. So there's probably a lot of people that your coworkers that are just from over the border. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you reached out. I'm glad we're talking here. For everyone out there, we shouldn't make sure everyone understands. Representative Kind, I believe it is retiring. Mm-hmm. He decided that he's not going to run again.
Right. Exactly. So it's a wide open seat for the first time in 20 some years. Which is a pretty big deal in a district like this that's been held by a Democrat for a long time.
The district, to say it's gerrymandered, holy cow! They have tried their best to basically. I don't know if they're trying to put as many Democrats in one district so they can seal them off, or they're desperately trying to diffuse as much Democratic vote as possible. But that is a wild district that runs basically, like I said, right across the river in Wisconsin, the southeast suburbs, all the way down to the border with Illinois.
Yeah, it's a pretty big district. I'm actually going over tonight to Stevens Point, which is, kind of hooked up into central Wisconsin. So you go all the way over to Eau Claire, which is where I'm from, and hook over into the Stevens Point area. Yeah, and then all the way down the Mississippi River, down to Prairie du Chien. So, yeah, it's pretty wild.
I'm going to suggest to everyone that's listening right now, you're going to need to make a donation to Rebecca's campaign because I'll tell you what, the driving alone, my goodness. Let's
yeah.
You're going to be putting a lot of miles on the car.
I'm in the car right now. I'm in the car on the side of the road just making my way through the district, So,
so there, we want to find out more about you. Who exactly is Rebecca Cooke?
Yeah, so I grew up here in the Eau Claire area. I was born and raised, grew up on a dairy farm in Eau Claire, and was really active in 4-H growing up, so shout out to 4-H. Showed dairy cattle all through the years, but, like a lot of Wisconsin family farms, we had to sell our cows because of the price of milk and competition with larger dairies. But growing up on a farm, had a really big impact on me, both in the value set that I grew, but also just my work ethic and how to show up for people and show up for your neighbors. And so I actually went to school in the Twin Cities. I went to school at the University of St. Thomas and worked at an affordable housing nonprofit all 4 years of school there. Was my work study. So I really got to know the Twin Cities Metro in a big way, coming from small town Eau Claire, getting to walk in some different shoes in Minneapolis, St. Paul, which was great. And I think, widen my perspective of the world and connecting with other people that are different than me. So I went to school in the Twin Cities and worked on campaigns for a few years out of college, and then ultimately came back to Eau Claire to open my own small business. So I run a small business in my community downtown and also launched a nonprofit organization that supports other women on that same path of entrepreneurship. So we award 4 $2,000 grants every spring and fall to women who want to start their own businesses throughout western Wisconsin. So we've helped 27 small businesses launch throughout this district and community. Yeah, which is a big deal. I mean, in a small town, when you talk about how do you make change on the grassroots level, and how do you show up in rural communities and reinvest in them? It's really important, and that work, earned me. Governor Evers appointed me to the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation Board, or WEDC. So I've been able on the state level to really advocate for small businesses and farmers and rural communities in that capacity. So when the seat opened, I just really want to serve my community in an even greater way. So that's a little bit about
a few things here. First of all, 4-H is cool. My kids are in 4-H as well here in the metro area because because I think that is a great organization, and not only they don't have to deal with the cows like you did, but at the same time it's a great organization for understanding agriculture and horticulture, and it's just a lot of fun. They've always had a lot of fun with 4-H, so I can understand that.
Yeah, and it's really. Right, and it's really rooted in service, too, service to your community. So that's awesome.
Eau Claire is a lovely town. I've actually spent quite a bit of time over there because of my kids getting into honor bands, and we've gone over to the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. Mm-hmm. And so I've been there multiple times. That's an absolutely cute town that is the epitome of how do you revitalize a small town, change it, and keep it thriving, because that town is there are a lot of communities that would look at something like Eau Claire and say, how are you doing it? And they have done a very good job of creating growth, creating business opportunities, and nurturing the local climate enough to where you do have an economic advantage over other communities. It's done a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think, we experienced an incredible, I would say, renaissance of sorts in our community, and a lot of people that grew up there choosing to come home and reinvest. There's a lot of great peers of mine and folks that really were devoted to, and just increasing the overall quality of life of folks who live in Eau Claire and wanting it to be a livable city, not just for people that visit it, but for people who live there, and making it a community that you want to raise your family in, and that is thriving. So, so it's great to be a part of, and that's why, coming back to my hometown, wanting to have a small business in our downtown and wanting to really lay roots there was really important to me, just because there was so much positive energy kind of coming out in that way. It's infectious and hard not to want to be a part of. So.
Rebecca Cooke is joining us. She's running for Wisconsin 3 for the Democratic nomination to run in the general election over there. I want to bring up, of course, obviously your district is heavy in farming and heavy in dairy. Of course, there is this narrative the Republicans like to put out there that small farms are being killed off by the Democrats. That's ludicrous. Small farms are being killed off by corporate farming and the enablers that are the Republican Party that basically are looking at small farms. And Wisconsin, as you talk about the dairy industry, we've talked about it on this show. Wisconsin has actually been decimated. Their dairy industry has been decimated by the pricing, which then led to the opportunist of large corporate farms basically buying out farms, running farms out of town. Talk a little bit about this, because if we don't make a stand at some point, we're going to be down to 30 or 40 total corporate farms in this country, and there's not going to be and the small farm will disappear.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it's something, I think for folks to remember, farmers were our original entrepreneur in many ways. When I think about the dairy industry, I don't just lump it into agriculture, right? It's a huge part of our commerce system and our base. And I think when people lose a business like a family farm, it's not just losing a business. Also, it's losing a way of life. And part of your heritage. Our family had a farm in this district for 160 years. We pioneered here, in the 1800s to Buffalo County to start farming. And so when my dad had to sell our dairy cattle, it's not just, selling, something you've done for part of your life. It's selling so much more. It's part of your soul, right? Yeah. And having to pivot and figure out what's next. I mean, a lot of farmers have really been left to do that on their own. You see a lot of different agritourism ideas that people have really just come up with to make ends meet. You see a lot more dairy farmers starting to raise beef cattle, which is something my dad did to help supplement income. We also milked 3 farms at once. We had our home farm up the road, and another farm the other end up the road. And, it's tough, and it's not margins that are easy. And we're leaving a lot of people to figure it out on their own, which isn't, I don't think where we want the kind of direction we want to be of losing these farms, but also figuring out what farmers are to do after they do lose their farm. There aren't a ton of options, right?
I would agree with that. And it's interesting because I'd love to find out what the margins are there, because in Minnesota, it's much more grain farming, sugar beets, pork. And not saying that we don't have dairies. We have a lot of dairies here. But, I mean, of the larger agriculture there, the margins on that, I believe last time I checked, was like $24,000, which is, and it's actually gone down in the last few years even. What do you know off the top of your head what the margins are for the standard dairy farm, the standard agricultural farm in Wisconsin?
No, I don't know that off the top of my head. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I think it's because one of the things that's important about that is that it's if you're basically expecting people to work as hard as farmers do, dairy farmers do, that if they're only, their reward at the end of the year is, $24,000, that's a system that's just not going to work. And this is as you talk about the foundation, the original entrepreneurs, this is the foundation of American, efficiency. It's basically the ability for us to feed our own people, and if we basically get to a point where we're losing that, that's crippling.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
I want to ask you as well. Your district, I imagine, goes into some fairly conservative areas. Just one or two. The DFL in the state of Minnesota. One of the things that I've run into with some DFLers is that they're a little hesitant because they say, I'll go out there and they'll threaten me and all these things. I said, they're threatening you because they're trying to scare you away. They're trying to do this. And I said, well, it's working. Well, it's like, but you see, that's all they have left. They don't have ideas. They don't have, solutions. They're not looking out for their constituents. They're just trying to scare away the competition. You're going to get that. This is just the day and age we live in politics here. Talk a little bit about that and how you would address that as you're going around your district.
Yeah, I haven't had come into anything in particularly like that, as far as anybody, trying to intimidate me, I guess, in particular ways. I have had a lot of, pragmatic conversations, to be honest, with Republicans around this district. I think that there is, in both parties, there's fragments of, the far left and the far right, and I think that not all Republicans are like the radical right, that, my opponent certainly is, my Republican opponent is. I think there's a lot of Republicans that, are pragmatic, that are John McCain Republicans, that want to see somebody that can work across the aisle and that can truly work in a bipartisan way. And that's a pragmatist and knows how to get things done. And that's the kind of leader I intend to be. I think we're getting so far into these camps of us versus them. And we need to move out of that kind of thought, that kind of thinking, and the chaos that I think has been stirred up, through the Trump administration, and trickled through here. And I think, to me, it's important, a lot of democratic values that I have, but it's also really important for me to be able to work with my neighbors. You don't see Congress getting a lot of things done because of the hyper-partisanship that exists. And we're getting to these moments, especially when there's so many threats to our democracy, where we really need to be working together, no matter if you're an R or a D.
I would agree with that. And I think that the real challenge here, and I've always told people, it's like, hey, we're in a pandemic, medical bills, let's face it. Right now we have a lot of people sick, a lot of people tragically have died, but there's also a lot of people left behind with massive medical debt. And talking about that and the fact that, a lot of this is being instigated by people telling people not to get vaccinated, not to wear a mask. And the medical science tells us. I think that for Democrats going on out there and talking about it's not about what you want to hear politically, it's what's real. And I'm here for that. I think that does resonate, that people don't want to have that a political spin, that everything is run through a political filter, whether it's healthcare or religion or whatever. They just want honesty. And I think that, especially in this crisis right now, I think if the Democrats go and still hammer away on healthcare, we're the party that wants to do single payer. We want the party that wants to have affordable healthcare. We want to, if you're not for single payer, if you're just for a better healthcare system, Democrats are for more access and more affordability, that's for sure, across the line. So I think you're exactly right. I think you have to find those ways. And it will be interesting. I think we're starting to see that those moderate Republicans are just getting tired of getting further and further yanked to the right. I agree with you. I think they're looking for other options at this point.
Yeah, and I mean, I really intend to run a campaign in an office and on kitchen table issues. I think things that affect everyday Wisconsinites, everyday Americans, the things that people are worried about and staying up at night around, right? Like you said, like access to affordable, quality health care. My mom had a heart attack this summer and got a six-figure hospital bill.
No.
And if it wasn't on Medicare, I mean, she's a senior. I don't know how they would have afforded that. I'm on catastrophic health insurance myself that I have through the exchange as a small business owner, but it's not something that covers much, right? And so I think we have to rethink the way in which our healthcare system looks in America. We've got, from a rural broadband perspective, when you think about people and access to marketplaces, access to telehealth, being in rural communities, kids doing their homework in Culver's parking lots, that's a real big divide as far as, rural and urban and being able to have access to some of those services and resources that help communities move and thrive and grow. And I think, job creation and sustainable job creation, having job creators that really, again, want to invest in the community. You look at how great Eau Claire is doing as a community, and that's because of the business owners that have really chosen to invest in their employees. So it's a lot of those basic things I think that folks worry about. And I think, too, from an education perspective, ensuring that, no matter what school district you're in, that you have the resources that you need in the classroom. So those are kind of the main pillars I would say that my campaign is, and I'm really focused on, and that I think people are really worried about right now, to be honest, in this current pandemic world. I mean, we're not post-pandemic yet, right?
No, we're not. We're not.
Yeah, and just figuring out how to make ends meet in what is an economy that's up and down. So
Rebecca Cooke,
a lot of different folks.
Rebecca Cooke is once again running Wisconsin 3. If you'd like to donate or volunteer, once again, she's running for the Democratic nomination so she can run in the general election. You find out more information about her campaign at Cooke. That's COOKE, for FOR Wisconsin, all spelled out.com. COOKEFOR WISCONSIN.com. And you can find out more information, make a donation, volunteer if you can. And once again, if you're in the Twin Cities metro area, Wisconsin 3 is right across the river. I mean, quite literally from the southeast suburbs, it's right there. It's closer to you if you're on the south side than any of the northern metro suburbs. So by all means, help the Democrats across the river as well and see if we can make sure we hold Wisconsin 3 for the Democrats. Rebecca, I appreciate the time. Thank you very much today.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
All
Thanks
right.
a lot.
You bet. We'll take a break. Come on back. It's the Matt McNeil Show right here on AM 950.